There was a time when fear owned me. It lived in my chest like a ghost with cold hands, whispering every reason why I could never be more than average. Fear told me not to dream too big, not to step outside the comfort zone that was quietly killing me. It made me doubt every idea, every plan, every ambition. And yet, somewhere deep inside, there was a spark, a whisper louder than fear, telling me that life was meant to be more than survival. That whisper became my rebellion. My decision to rise wasn't sudden. It was forged in silence, in the lonely hours when I chose to bet on myself instead of surrender to the safety of smallness. This is the story of how I broke free from fear and built the wealth that once felt impossible. It's not just my story. It's the blueprint for anyone who's tired of letting fear decide their future. Fear is a masterful liar. It makes the invisible feel real and the impossible seem certain. In my early years, fear wrapped itself around my mind like a thick fog. Every time I thought of starting a business, investing, or chasing a bigger dream, fear painted visions of failure so vividly that I could almost taste the defeat before even trying. It whispered, "You'll lose everything. You're not smart enough. People like you don't succeed." And so I stayed small. I stayed broke. I stayed safe. The truth is, fear doesn't just paralyze your actions. It rewires your identity. It makes you believe that playing small is who you are, when in reality, it's just who you've become under fear's hypnosis. I didn't realize back then that wealth starts not with money, but with identity. And fear had stolen mine. I was living in a prison without walls, locked inside a story that wasn't mine, chained to limitations that weren't even real. Everything changed the day I hit rock bottom. I had less than $20 in my bank account, unpaid bills stacked on my desk, and an overwhelming sense that I was wasting my life. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about purpose, about becoming the person I knew I could be. That day, sitting in the quiet chaos of my tiny apartment, I asked myself a question that burned through the fog. What if fear is lying to me? It was a strange thought, almost rebellious. What if all the limits I believed in were illusions? That question cracked something open inside me. It was like a window of possibility creaked open in a room that had been sealed for years. In that moment, I made a decision, not to become rich, but to become fearless. I promised myself I would act in spite of fear, not in the absence of it. I realized courage is not the lack of fear, it's movement in its presence. And that single decision became the seed of my entire transformation. At first, I thought overcoming fear meant giant leaps. But I quickly learned that real transformation happens in small, daily acts of courage. I started with what I call micro-bravery, tiny moments where I chose boldness over comfort. I applied for freelance gigs even when I doubted my skills. I invested my first $50 in a book about business instead of wasting it on distractions. I started waking up at 5 a.m. to build a routine, even though every part of me wanted to sleep in. Each act was small on its own, but together they were bricks building a new version of me. Fear didn't disappear overnight. It screamed louder at first, but with every small victory, its voice weakened. I began to realize that fear feeds on inaction. The more you move, the less it matters. I wasn't fearless yet, but I was moving, and momentum is the antidote to fear. It doesn't just push you forward, it pulls you out of who you used to be. As I built momentum, I discovered a deeper truth. Wealth is first a mindset, then a bank account. As I built momentum, I discovered a deeper truth. Wealth is first a mindset, then a bank account. My old mindset was programmed by scarcity, by the belief that money was hard to get, success was rare, and people like me weren't meant to have it. So I started reprogramming my mind. I devoured books, listened to mentors, filled my ears with stories of people who had risen from nothing. Every morning, I wrote affirmations of who I wanted to become, even when I didn't believe them yet. I visualized a future where I was free, abundant, and unshakable. It felt fake at first, but repetition rewired me. The mind becomes what it's fed. Soon, I began seeing opportunities instead of obstacles. I stopped asking, what if I fail? And started asking, what if this works? That single shift made fear lose its grip. Because when your belief in possibility grows stronger than your fear of failure, you become unstoppable. With my mind awakening and fear shrinking, I finally began to build. I chose one skill to master, something I could monetize, and treated it like life or death. I studied relentlessly, practiced obsessively, and built small projects to test my knowledge. At first, nothing worked. I failed publicly, lost clients, made rookie mistakes, but this time I didn't quit. Fear used to make failure feel fatal. Now I saw failure as feedback. Every setback became data, not defeat. And slowly, painfully, results began to come. Small wins. First client. First $100. First month with more income than bills. It was slow, but it was real. And each step forward became a loud message to fear. You don't control me anymore. I realized wealth isn't built in one bold leap. It's forged in consistent, courageous steps taken while your knees are still shaking. I was no longer running from fear. I was running through it and leaving it behind with every stride. The deeper I went into building my dreams, the louder a new fear became, the fear of visibility. It's one thing to quietly build behind the scenes, hidden from judgment. It's another to step into the light where the world can see you try and possibly fail. I used to avoid posting my work, sharing my ideas, or promoting my offers because it felt like standing naked in a storm of opinions. I imagined people laughing, criticizing, or secretly hoping I'd fall flat. That fear almost made me disappear. But I realized something powerful. Obscurity is the enemy of opportunity. If no one knows you, no one can hire you, pay you, or believe in you. So I forced myself to show up, even when my voice trembled. I posted my work, shared my story, and made my presence known. Yes, there were critics. Yes, I stumbled. But with every public step, I grew bolder. And something magical happened. People started responding. Clients came. Supporters came. Visibility didn't destroy me. It expanded me. Fear had lied again. For years, I operated from a place of scarcity. Every decision was soaked in fear. Fear that there wouldn't be enough, that if I spent or invested, I'd lose it all. That mindset kept me trapped in smallness. I hoarded instead of invested, hesitated instead of acted. To build real wealth, I had to break that cycle. I learned to see money as energy, not just currency, something that flows when you move with purpose. I started investing in tools, education, and relationships that could multiply my value. The first time I spent $1,000 on a business coach, I felt sick. Fear screamed that I was throwing money into a black hole. But that decision opened doors I couldn't have imagined. I learned that wealth flows to those who trust their ability to grow it. Scarcity whispers, hold tight, but abundance says build bridges. And every bridge I've built expanded my reach, my mindset, and my income. Scarcity lost its grip because I stopped asking, what will I lose? And started asking, what could this create? Courage might ignite transformation, but discipline sustains it. Once I stepped out of fear's shadow, I realized motivation wasn't enough. I needed structure. Fear thrives in chaos. It feeds on disorganization and procrastination. So I built a fortress of habits to protect my momentum. I scheduled deep work hours when I was most focused, eliminated distractions, and created non-negotiables around my daily routines. No social media until my most important tasks were done. No skipping workouts because my energy was the fuel for my ambition. These weren't glamorous changes, but they were powerful. Over time, discipline became my safety net. Even on bad days, when fear whispered that I was slipping, my systems carried me forward. I learned that habits are stronger than feelings. You don't need to feel fearless to act. You need to act consistently until fear becomes irrelevant. Discipline made my growth inevitable, and inevitability is fear's worst enemy. Fear doesn't vanish when you make money. It mutates. As I started earning more, fear shifted from what if I fail to what if I lose it all. That fear haunted me until I learned emotional resilience. Wealth without resilience is like building a castle on sand. So I began training my mind to stay calm under pressure. I practiced detachment, celebrating wins without clinging to them, and facing losses without letting them define me. I journaled daily, poured my thoughts on a paper so they wouldn't poison my focus. I meditated to quiet the noise and reconnect to my inner power. Slowly, I became unshakable. The market could crash, a client could disappear, a launch could flop, and I'd still stand. Because my self-worth no longer lived in numbers. Resilience gave me something fear could never touch: peace. And with peace, I could think clearly, move strategically, and keep building no matter what storms came my way. Fear had once made me depend on a single source of income. That dependence was a leash around my neck. One job loss, one bad month, and everything would crumble. To break free, I had to build multiple streams. I started small, freelance projects, digital products, affiliate income, anything that could diversify my earnings. At first it was chaotic, but I approached it like an architect, building slowly, one stream at a time. Each new stream reduced my fear because it reduced my risk. Suddenly, one client couldn't break me. One setback couldn't sink me. That freedom gave me confidence to take bigger risks, the kind that build real wealth. I realized fear thrives on fragility, but fades in the presence of stability. When your income has roots in multiple places, fear can't find a foothold. That was the first time I felt truly powerful. Not because I was rich yet, but because I was unbreakable. And that mindset became the soil where wealth could grow wild. Even as money grew, the hardest battles weren't external, they were internal. Self-doubt is fear wearing a familiar face. It whispers that your success was luck, that you're an imposter, that any day now the world will see you're not enough. I faced that word daily. No amount of external validation could silence it. So I stopped trying to silence it. I started outgrowing it. I made a pact with myself. Self-doubt could come along for the ride, but it couldn't touch the steering wheel. I showed up even when I felt unworthy. I launched offers before I felt ready. I spoke boldly while my hands shook. And something strange happened. The more action I took, the quieter self-doubt became. Not because it disappeared, but because I stopped believing it. Doubt became background noise, and my actions became the volume that drowned it out. That's when I understood. Confidence isn't something you wait for. It's something you build in the fire of action. And every step I took was gasoline on that fire. As fear lost its grip, I began seeing wealth differently. In the beginning, I chased money like it was the prize. But the more I grew, the more I saw that money is just the shadow of impact. Real wealth is built when you create value, so powerful it transforms other people's lives. So I shifted my focus from taking to giving. I asked, how can I solve deeper problems? How can I serve at a higher level? That shift exploded my growth. Clients trusted me more, opportunities found me, and income became a side effect of contribution. Fear had always made me focus on myself, my risk, my loss, my failure. Contribution forced me to focus outward, and that dissolved fear's power. Because when you're driven by service, failure stops being personal. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, who can I help? And when you lead with that question, wealth follows like a shadow chasing light. As my foundation grew stronger, I stopped seeing fear as an enemy and started using it as fuel. I realized that fear is not a stop sign, it's a signal. It points to the exact places where growth lives. Every time I felt fear surge through my body before a big decision, I started reframing it as excitement in disguise. Instead of running from it, I ran toward it. If fear said, you can't launch that product, I launched it. If fear said, you can't speak on that stage, I grabbed the microphone. Fear became my compass. The more it scared me, the more I knew it mattered. This mindset shift was revolutionary. Fear no longer shrank me. It sharpened me. I began using fear like a weight in the gym, lifting it until my courage grew stronger. And with every fear I faced, my identity stretched. I was no longer the person fear once controlled. I was becoming someone fear could no longer touch. Comfort is a seductive trap. Once I hit financial stability, fear tried to lull me back into complacency. It whispered, "This is enough. Don't risk it. Don't stretch further." But I knew comfort was just fear in disguise. Fear of losing what I had. Fear of reaching beyond what felt safe. So I forced my vision to expand. I started setting goals that felt impossible. Income targets that scared me. Projects that seemed out of reach. Dreams so big they made me tremble. And then I reverse engineered them into daily steps. I learned that the only difference between impossible and inevitable is persistence. Expanding my vision felt like standing on the edge of a cliff every day. But that edge is where growth lives. The comfort zone builds walls. The growth zone builds wings. And every time I chose growth over comfort, fear faded like a shadow under rising light. Wealth doesn't grow in safety. It grows in calculated risk. For years, I believed risk was reckless, but playing it safe was what had kept me broke. So I trained myself to take smart risks. I studied deeply before moving, created safety nets, and always protected the downside, but I still jumped. I invested in projects that had no guarantees, hired people before I felt ready, and launched products that could have flopped. Not all of them succeeded, but each risk carried lessons that sharpened my edge. The irony is, fear screams that risk is dangerous, but the greater danger is stagnation. Risk became my bridge from where I was to where I wanted to be. Every time I took one, I returned stronger, wiser, wealthier. I learned that courage without risk is just theory. Wealth without risk is just fantasy. And the day I embraced risk, fear lost its leverage. As my income grew, I realized something crucial. Fear often sneaks back in through emotional chaos. If my business relied only on my mood, my energy, or my motivation, it was fragile, and fear loves fragility. So I began building systems that didn't care about how I felt. I automated my marketing, created content calendars, built funnels that sold while I slept, and installed financial systems to track and grow my income. At first, it felt mechanical, almost soulless, but those systems became my armor. They worked when I was tired. They worked when doubt whispered. They worked even when fear tried to creep back in. Systems are emotion-proof. And once my business stopped depending on my emotional highs, fear lost its favorite weapon. It could scream all it wanted, but my systems kept producing. That was when I tasted true security, not from luck or hustle, but from structure. Wealth stopped being an emotional roller coaster. It became predictable, sustainable, and solid. Fear loves isolation, and I had spent years trying to do everything alone. But to build something bigger than myself, I had to let go of control. I started hiring people, not just for tasks, but to become leaders. At first, fear screamed louder than ever. What if they mess it up? What if they betray you? What if you lose control? But leadership isn't about control, it's about trust. I invested time in training my team, empowering them to make decisions, and letting them own their zones of genius. Slowly, they became better than me in areas I used to micromanage. And as they grew, my empire grew. Fear shrank because I was no longer carrying everything alone. I had people who could keep building even if I disappeared for a while. That's when I learned true wealth isn't what you build with your hands. It's what you can step away from and still watch grow. Fear can't thrive in a kingdom of leaders. The deeper I got into wealth, the more I understood. Energy is the real currency. Fear feeds on exhaustion, on burnout, on a drained mind that can't fight back. So I began guarding my energy like it was gold. I created boundaries around my time. I stopped saying yes to everything and everyone. I started saying no, loudly, unapologetically. I optimized my health, ate clean, trained my body like an athlete, and treated rest as sacred. I scheduled creative time like an unbreakable appointment. People thought I was being extreme, but they didn't see the truth. Without energy, even genius ideas die. Fear thrives when you're tired. It's loud when you're weak. But with energy, clarity returns, courage reignites, and vision sharpens. Guarding my energy made me powerful. And power is the silence that makes fear irrelevant. Fear loves to hide in ignorance. For years, I avoided learning about money because it scared me. Budgets, taxes, investing, scaling, all of it felt overwhelming. But the less I understood, the more fear controlled me. So I faced it head on. I studied financial literacy like my future depended on it, because it did. I learned to read balance sheets, track cash flow, build profit margins, and invest intelligently. At first it felt foreign, like decoding a secret language. But soon, clarity replaced confusion, and clarity destroys fear. Once I understood the rules of money, fear could no longer bluff me. I wasn't guessing anymore, I was strategizing. Financial literacy gave me X-ray vision. I could see where every dollar came from, where it was going, and how to multiply it. That understanding became armor. Because fear only controls what you don't understand. And once I understood money, I owned it, instead of it owning me. The bigger I built, the bigger the setbacks became. There were launches that flopped, investments that tanked, partnerships that collapsed. Old fear tried to return, whispering that maybe I'd gone too far. But I had learned a new truth. Setbacks aren't signs to stop, they're signals to adapt. So I treated every failure like data. I dissected what went wrong, adjusted my systems, refined my strategies, and came back sharper. Each setback became a training ground for resilience. Fear thrives on finality. It wants you to see failure as the end. But I started seeing failure as feedback. Nothing was permanent unless I quit. That mindset transformed losses into leverage. Fear had no oxygen left because I no longer saw setbacks as threats. I saw them as tuition, the price of mastery. And every time I rose from one, I became more dangerous to the limits that once contained me. When money first flowed, I chased lifestyle, cars, gadgets, luxury. But over time, I saw the trap. Fear hides behind shiny things, trying to distract you from purpose. I didn't want wealth that could vanish with market swings or trends. I wanted legacy, wealth that outlives me. So I began building assets that could stand the test of time. Real estate, intellectual property, automated businesses, equity in companies. I focused on what would still be thriving decades from now. Lifestyle fades, but legacy compounds. This shift gave me calm power. I no longer needed to prove anything with possessions. I was building something eternal. And legacy building made fear irrelevant, because legacy isn't fragile. It doesn't depend on this month's sales or next quarter's market. It's rooted deep like a tree. Fear can't uproot what's planted in purpose. And purpose became the heartbeat of everything I built. In the end, overcoming fear wasn't about tactics. It was about identity. For years, fear had convinced me I was someone who wanted wealth, but wasn't meant for it. It made me see myself as an outsider, a dreamer, an imposter. So I rewrote my identity. Every day, I declared to myself, I am a wealth creator. I am a builder. I am unstoppable. At first, it felt like a lie. But identity is shaped by repetition and action. The more I said it, the more I acted like it, the more it became real. Identity is the root. Behavior is the fruit. Fear withers when your identity grows stronger than its voice. I stopped trying to become wealthy and started being the person who builds wealth naturally. That identity changed everything. Because when you believe you're the kind of person who wins, fear becomes irrelevant, and winning becomes inevitable. Fear cannot survive in a grateful heart. Gratitude became my secret weapon. No matter how high I climbed, I started every day listing what I was thankful for. The struggles that shaped me, the people who supported me, the opportunities fear once told me I'd never get. Gratitude disarms fear. It reminds you that you're already rich in ways fear can't touch. It keeps you grounded, humble, and open to more. Fear says, you're still not enough. Gratitude says, look how far you've come. Gratitude turned my ambition from desperation to celebration. It replaced fear of losing with joy of living. And when your heart is full, fear has nowhere left to hide. That's when I knew I had truly won, not just the game of money, but the battle for my soul. Fear didn't disappear when I took my first leap. It simply changed its shape. It no longer screamed at me to stay small. It whispered doubts as I tried to climb higher. That's what most people don't understand. Fear doesn't vanish with progress. It evolves. When you start winning, fear tries to convince you that your success is fragile, that one mistake will bring everything crashing down.